guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books. Today we are doing another reading roundtable where we get some of our bookish friends to talk about the bookish things that they've been reading recently. We've done a couple of these. If you've missed them, it's a relatively new format that we're starting to try and bring in more conversation type stuff because that's our favorite type of content to make for you guys, is where we're talking about books. Plus, it gets boring just hearing me and Gretchen talk about stuff. We like hearing what other people are reading, and then sometimes we get recommendations for things to look at, and they get recommendations for things to look at. It's just a good time, and you get to hear more voices. That's what we're here for, discussions, because it's betwixt the books. Yeah, so we'll do a round of introductions because there's new people here, and then we'll go into talking about our things. So we'll start with Gretchen today.
Hi guys, I'm Gretchen. If you don't know my face, welcome. You must be new to the channel. We're happy to have you here. I read a weird combination of sex books and politics and history. Nothing makes sense. It's fine.
I'm Erica. I'm a librarian. I usually read fantasy because gotta have that escapism. But a lot of times I'll poke into other genres, like I'll read some nonfiction from time to time. I'll read some romance. I'll read some most things except for usually thrillers and cozy mysteries because I don't need that stress.
Hi, I'm Emily. I am actually the new wife of a former member, frequenter of the channel, Taylor. I usually find myself reading fantasy literature and some science fiction. I had a very long urban fantasy kick, and I've been on a little bit more of a science fiction kick recently, kind of trying to do some prep work for one of my own projects. So lots of stuff.
And I'm Michaela. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you recognize me. I do videos with Gretchen. I used to do solo videos, but I've been on a weird hiatus. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. We've had this conversation multiple times in reading roundtables about it's we'll get there. Just give me a hot second to figure out what I want to do. I, in these videos, have been talking a lot about fan fiction because that's the majority of what I've been reading. The stuff that is not fan fiction that I've been reading is almost exclusively the stuff that I read to talk about with Gretchen. So you've seen those discussions already. So again, today I'm going to be talking about fan fiction, but when I do read for myself, which has been at least a year at this point since I've done that pretty much, it's usually horror, sci-fi, fantasy, literary fiction. I do read romance as well. I'm not a big nonfiction person, but when nonfiction gets thrown in there every once in a while. But yeah, that's where you're going to see me. A lot of queer books, mostly queer books. But that's where I'm living right now, is fan fiction. So you're hearing me talk about Steve Harrington and Eddie Munson constantly. That's all that you need to know.
So it's always funny because I've been making a lot of videos for the channel lately that have all been romance books. And again, longtime viewers will know that the reason is that I requested too many advanced review copies. And so I am supposed to read one romance novel a week from June through September.
That's
I requested too many. It's so much banging. Worse, it's so much miscommunication. I actually talked about that a lot in my review of Sammy Espinosa's last review, which I actually liked, and it had miscommunication in it. But anyway, because I'm talking about all the banging in other videos, I've been using the Reading Roundtable as a time to talk about some of the nonfiction that I'm still listening to. I do a feature called my American Presidential Reading Challenge, where I'm reading, I'm at almost 200 books actually since 2016.
Only 46 presidents, Gretchen.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was about to say, where are these extra presidents coming from?
And I'm still missing about a half a dozen of them.
They're the secret presidents.
It's just she keeps reading about Nixon over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
I found 2 new Nixon documentaries on HBO Max. I'm a really happy person right now. But anyway, no, we're not talking about any of that at all. We're talking about women during World War II.
Okay.
So this was a book where I read a lot of really sad nonfiction, really like the world is a terrible place. And so I found this book called Lethal Tides, about Mary Sears. And I was like, who is Mary Sears? And what are you talking about? The women marine scientists of World War II. The author's first name is Catherine. I cannot begin to pronounce her last name. There will be a picture in the thumbnail. But the book is called Lethal Tides. And this just seemed like a wholesome nonfiction book. Like, I just need a break nonfiction book, considering that recently I've read about like criminal justice reform and the KKK, and I needed a break. And so basically, Mary Sears was someone who, in a time, obviously, when women were just didn't have jobs, basically, like pre-World War II, was supported by her parents to go into the sciences. And she decided that she wanted to be a marine biologist and an oceanographer. And she was very lucky when she went to college to basically come under the tutelage of the premier oceanographer, a man, and become his research assistant. And when he created a whole new marine biology center at Woods Hole, he took her with him. So here's the thing, though. At this point in time, women were not allowed to be on ships because they were bad luck. So this woman becomes the premier like researcher of like plankton and sea creatures. But she's like trapped having the men go out to get her samples and bring them back. And she can't like progress, right? She gets really stuck in the hierarchy because the only people who are allowed to move any higher in this research institution are the men. And so World War II comes around, and the United States Navy is like, we're having this whole Pacific Navy campaign. The whole thrust of the Pacific campaign was island hopping. So if you're unfamiliar with the Pacific Naval Campaign during World War II, basically they wanted to island hop their way to Japan so that they had bases that they left in their wake so they could like fly the planes off of them and have supply depots and all that kind of stuff. So, but these islands are surrounded by reefs, there's tides, and they're all on the opposite side of the world where people have very little data to go on. And there are actually some really, really terrible attacks on islands where a lot of American lives are lost, literally because they didn't know a coral reef was there. And so the Navy goes to Woods Hole and they're like, hey, do you have someone who's expendable that we can bring to the Navy to do this research for us? And the man in charge was like, you can have this woman. So she goes off to be the premier oceanographer and marine biologist for the Navy. The office ends up, it's called the Hydrographic Office. It ends up being staffed by hundreds of women because that's the only people the Navy has to staff this office at this time, really. And there are some men scientists that are still there, but she ends up being like one of the first female like commanders of the Navy, civilian commander, but they even tap her to run the office after the war ends because their work is so instrumental to them winning the Pacific campaign that they're like, this science stuff is really, really important. And believe it or not, this woman is really, really good at it. So we're going to make her like the commander of this brand new office that exists to this day in the United States Navy. So it ended up being really, really interesting. I am interested in ocean science, but I'm certainly not an oceanographer or anything like that. And I get worried in sciencey books sometimes where they're going to try to explain the science to you and you're going to be like, I feel really too dumb for this book. But it was really, really well explained. I felt like I learned a lot. And I also feel like for people who are interested in the application of her data and her sciencey knowledge, like it isn't just a biography about her life. It really gets into detail on the tactics of these island hopping campaigns and how the tide, water samples, all that was used by the Navy when they attacked some of these islands. So I did not expect to be that into it, but I really got into it. So I really enjoyed it. And I think that it's just one of those those stories that you don't think of. You're like, yeah, the Navy took those islands. Good for them. But like there was all this work done by predominantly women to get them there. So I really enjoyed that, surprisingly. And it wasn't nonfiction that made me feel like the world was gonna end.
It's interesting. I didn't realize that they still believed that women were bad luck up until World War II. Like, I see that as like a wooden ships, like late 1800s at least kind of thing. And like to hear about it in the same time that they're making these cruise liners for people to go on, and they're just like, but no women are bad luck. It doesn't make sense to me when you have hundreds of women on cruise liners and still go, but women though.
Bad luck.
Yeah.
The Titanic, bad luck. Tons of women on that.
Listen, there was one woman who was on all 3 of the White Star ships. So that woman may have been bad luck, but
that's a her problem.
That's a her problem.
They also do
Hashtag
talk
not
about
all women.
They also do talk about how like it was also like a very specific, not just, but a very specifically American thing. Because at a certain point, she goes like into the Caribbean to help them with a guano problem, and so bird guano or bird poop, is actually like a really, really important commodity as a fertilizer. And so there was this space down in the Caribbean where the birds were like dying. And so she came down to like inspect the waters and see what was happening in the food chain. And they were all just like, yeah, you can be on a ship. And she went to Europe and they were like, yeah, you could be on a ship. And America was like,
America was real fond of its sexism, though, at the time. Like, let's be real, it still is. But like,
I was gonna say, when did that change?
It hasn't changed, but I mean, just of the time, it was a very specific brand of modern sexism that they were very fond of, and any potential inroad to countering that was bad news. So, like,
I feel like a lot of the time too, America is Europe, but like 50 years later. So like, while that might have been like taken care of in Europe in the late 1800s, America, no, it's not going to happen for at least another 50 years.
We have to be different. We separated from Britain for a reason.
So we can lag behind it.
Yeah, but it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And especially I was also thinking too of like it's very much in the vein of like Hidden Figures too.
I was gonna say, is it like a Radium Girls, Rise of the Rocket Girls, Hidden Figures type, like women in STEM?
Yeah. So I enjoyed that, and I'm now reading the entire 27-hour biography of Robert Oppenheimer after watching the movie with a friend. So I've gone right back into, oh boy, I'm sad.
Our friend asked us to grab that for him at the library that I work at. And I was just like, yeah, no, buddy, there's a long wait on that one.
We sold out of it at our Barnes and Noble, and then like frantically had to order more copies in. So like, yeah, it's high demand.
Here's the thing that's hilarious, that the print copy on Libby, like on all the Libby copies, has a long wait list. The audiobook was immediately available. And I was just like, thank your friend.
Weird.
See, it's also funny to me because I had added it to my, I get like newsletters from like Book Riot, especially Book Riot and Lit Hub, and they give me updates on adaptation news. And I think that there was something that was just like, oh, Oppenheimer based on Modern Prometheus, like the first trailer just dropped for that. And I was like, okay, I'll add that to my list of things that I might want to purchase. And like going through month by month, I'm just like, okay, this isn't like, maybe I'll take it off my list soon because it doesn't seem like anybody's chasing down this bio with this movie coming out. Now that the movie's out, now people are chasing it. And I'm just like, come on.
Yeah.
So I'll have to order that one.
They can't read the book before they watch the movie. That's called spoilers.
That's called spoilers to something that happened over like 70 years ago.
I think
Listen,
honestly,
We need
It's
to have
people,
to
okay.
guess, will they drop the bomb or not?
so like Taylor and I just finished listening to the last podcast on the left did a massive like 7-part series on the Manhattan Project. So it's like 13 hours that we just listened to the Manhattan Project via podcast form. I don't think we're gonna go watch Oppenheimer. I get it.
no. Yeah.
I get it.
I mean, it's gonna be a bummer.
Yeah. Like I'm
There's
sorry.
there's no way to get around the fact that it's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Erica, you want to take us out of Bummersville, or are we headed back there?
No.
Oh no.
So it's really funny at the beginning that Michaela said bookish things, because that's how I felt reading the complete fiction of H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, you read all of it.
I read all of it, and
Okay.
it took me multiple months.
I bet.
Yeah.
And I was partway through, and I'd turn to my coworkers and I'd be like, I'm ready to be done with this now. And they're just like, you can stop.
No, it's anytime you wanted.
You can
Actually.
stop. And I'm just like, no, I cannot. I cannot stop. I am committed to this now. And then I was saying that I was like, 90% done, because every day I have an hour-long lunch. I make, and like in that time period, I'd make maybe like 3% more. So it took a while. And so like I was at like 92, 93%. And I said it to one of my coworkers again, just like, I'm ready to be done with this now. And one of them was like, again, you can stop at any time. And a different coworker was just like, you know what? I take back what I said about you being able to stop. You have to finish it now.
At 93%, it's foolish not to. Like, just
Sunken
finish.
cost, I mean, once you get like 10% in, because the thing's so huge, it's sunken cost already. Like let's spend the other 40 hours trying to read the rest of this. So for those who don't know, and if you're watching this channel, I would think you probably would know, but some of my coworkers didn't know who H.P. Lovecraft was, which was wild to me, especially the ones with MLSs.
That is wild.
That is very
and or like if I said something about like Cthulhu, they'd be like, what? It's just like, how do you, like, it feels like it's such a part of the zeitgeist now, but I guess not in circles that aren't filled with nerds. So for those of you who don't know, H.P. Lovecraft, Howard Phillips Lovecraft, was a very timid man. He grew up in Providence. His parents were both institutionalized for mental health issues. And so he was raised by his aunt. He was also treated abusively by his mother when she was still with him. He went to high school for a while and then dropped out at the end of his senior year because of too many mental health crises in his own life. Eventually he met a woman, and they got married. I guess his aunts didn't approve of having a working woman in the house. So, and they moved over to New York. He hated it in New York. And so he and his wife kind of drifted apart. He moved back to Providence. She did not. And he spent the rest of his life, I think, just kind of being thrilled to not be in New York anymore. And that's kind of when he started cranking out a lot of the works we know him for, including Call of Cthulhu, At the Mountains of Madness, Color Out of Space, and so on and so forth. Now he has about 64 works, mostly short stories. A lot, I'd say the first, and also to cap it off too, he died very young. He died, I believe, in his 30s. So not a fun life Lovecraft had, but he has influenced a lot of later horror writers because he really kind of played with the idea of cosmic horror in a way that people hadn't really before. Like he was really inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, and just kind of took it and applied it to a bunch of things that he was presumably afraid of, which was most things. And especially people who
the
had
ocean.
a different skin color than him. Apparently when he was, and that was a huge part of why he did not like living in New York. And I think there's a lot of people who are diehard Lovecraft fans who will be like, no, he wasn't racist, or like racism doesn't play a part of it. But his wife at the time was just like, anytime we'd pass by a different colored person on the street, he would be all like angry and mumbling to himself. So like, you can't, and that's in the 20s. So he had his own special amount of racism for the time. So yeah, I read all of his stuff. And which was an interesting project in that I was able to kind of see his works evolve and kind of really be able to see what worked best. As it was for most of them, I could like retain about 80% of what he was writing, because he writes in this incredibly archaic way. For example, spelling the word show as SHEW. Yeah, constantly. And so it was just a lot of that, and there was a lot of like really cheesy ending lines and plot twists you could see coming like 8,000 miles ahead that it seems like he didn't think that the audience would ever figure out. Yeah, so it was interesting to read it. A lot of people I know are Lovecraft fans, or at least have been inspired in some way by his works. And it was like a lot of the stuff that he's known for, he wrote after he got back to Providence. And a lot of that stuff wasn't really my favorites. Honestly, my favorites of it were the ones that were written a little bit more colloquially, that were written a little bit more pulpy, like Herbert West Reanimator. That one was just kind of this really fun, over-the-top zombie sort of thing. And yes, the inspiration for the film Reanimator from the 80s, which I have not seen. And it was just a lot of, I mean, every time I read a new story, I would message my husband and my sister, who are both Lovecraft fans, and say what I felt that H.P. Lovecraft's fears were that inspired the story. Like what was he genuinely afraid of? Not like what was the bad guy in the story, but what was he probably genuinely afraid of that led to him writing this story. This was inspired by Overly Sarcastic Productions video on Lovecraft stories, which if you haven't seen it, wonderful. And so a lot of the time it was, people who aren't white. And it's just like, so it was fun to kind of analyze it from that perspective, I think, because it's kind of like looking at a different layer than what is on the surface. So yeah, it got, the times when it was especially tough were times when, he was writing a fairly decent story, probably one of the few that I found like actually kind of creepy. And his entire body of horror works, doesn't speak well. And of course the character had a black cat with a very unfortunate name, and which apparently is the same name of Lovecraft's actual cat, growing up anyways. And he keeps referring to the cat by name. It's just like, please stop calling the cat by its name.
No, I remember when you sent that to me.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting trip, especially when you start to realize, oh, these are interesting concepts, interesting ideas for stories told by a not particularly skilled writer. If there was somebody else writing those stories, if it was like maybe Stephen King. I don't know. I haven't read enough Stephen King to like be able to say for sure, but you know, somebody else who adapted those stories and wrote them for like modern day, they could be creepy, they could be good, they could be deep. Because it's Lovecraft.
Yeah.
It was a lot of lore dumping that didn't need to happen.
As someone who's like a big like horror person, like that's one of my genres that I'm like very deep into. I would say that like if you are interested in horror, reading Lovecraft, I would read like probably the hits, like one or two, and you've got it. Like you don't I would not suggest reading Lovecraft's entire body of work. Really. And then
I will say though that like doing that though, I was just thinking while Erica was talking about how like Michaela and I were actually reading like the entire Percy Jackson series right now. And like the entire purpose of that is to see that progression also of like as you're watching an author's work. And I mean we do that naturally. Michaela and I just like are doing it for review purposes. So we can actually talk about that in the review. Less each individual story and more as you're watching like a writer progress. It doesn't seem like Lovecraft progressed all that far. But
I mean like some of the stories later, like if you looked at some of like his earlier stuff versus like Color Out of Space, there's definitely growth. If you look at like his earlier stuff as far as like kind of over the top plot twists and stuff like that, not as much growth. And especially because there was one story where, you know, I think miscegenation is a big theme of his. And any sort of racial mixing or anything like that. And he's writing a story of, spoiler alert, if you really want to read this one, it turns out that the main character is like descended from some ape lady or something. And it's just like such an over the top plot twist that you see coming a mile away. And that story came from Lovecraft writing to somebody else saying like, hey, I could make a story that would actually like chill the blood, so scary. I can do this. I'm a champion. Basically.
When you are scared of everything, I'm sure you think you write a very scary story.
Easily. So,
oh my God.
So it's interesting too in like the reason that people watch The Room, where it's just like this is happening. this is a real thing that's out there, and like what?
I always say that that's why I'm really happy that Twilight exists, because it gives me confidence as a writer that I too can become published.
I used to download free ebooks from a particular newsletter that I used to get, and I got that one because everything in it was so terrible. And my Kindle app is full of like really, really, really badly written, super trashy romance novels, because it's like, if these can get published, then so can I, goddammit.
Yeah. And I'll say probably my favorite was probably The Strange Case of Charles Dexter Ward. So for anyone who wants to know which ones I actually did really like, I really like Case of Charles Dexter Ward. I thought that it was written very well. I thought that it was a little bit harder to guess the twist. I mean, it wasn't really hard to guess, you know, what the twist was going to be, but like where exactly it was kind of was more interesting. And again, and like his pulpier stuff, I did like Rats in the Walls, except for the cat's name. I did like Herbert West Reanimator. I did like some of the big ones. For example, I liked, was it The Space Out of Time, something like that. Except for the part where he lore dumps on you for 2 hours. So there are ones that I did like. It's just a difficult read, man.
Oh my God.
And I spent a lot of months on it. Next up, complete Sherlock Holmes, baby.
I wanted
Erica,
That will also
are you
be an
aware
adventure.
that there are small books?
Yeah. Or that you don't have to read somebody's entire body of work. You can just read one. That's also an option.
No.
Listen, Michaela, we can't. This is the pot calling the kettle black, because we said for our reading challenge this year, like our buddy reading challenge, we would read a whole series, and then we go, yeah, we'll read like a duet or a trilogy, and then we were like, the entire Percy Jackson.
5.
Okay.
Which
So, I don't-
sounds great.
I
don't
wanted
think-
I wanted to give some horror recommendations of cosmic horror that is modern, that is maybe not written by a racist, and might also be helpful if like that's like if you are like, I really like this idea of like the unknown god-like creatures, like cults, that sort of stuff. Like if you like that idea but you don't want to read a book by a racist, The Fisherman by John Langan is out in paperback. That's a super good one that I would recommend. The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle is written by a
Yes.
Black author.
My
That's
husband
also
loves that one.
super awesome. So I would recommend
It's
that
based
one.
off of a super racist Lovecraft story.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to have an author who is not white kind of respond to that.
Yeah. All of the John Dies at the End books are hilarious and super fun. So if you want something that's like both scary and funny, that one's super good. Just some options for you if you
And
want.
the author did finally change his pen name
Back from
after
the
after
character
being
to,
told,
yeah,
it's not really appropriate.
I get the idea. Like the idea was the character.
Yeah,
did
I mean,
it,
I understand the idea behind it. It just wasn't exactly the best thought out.
Yes.
I will say too, if you do already like Lovecraft, if you are already kind of interested in Lovecraft, Providence by Caroline Kepnes, really, really enjoyed that one. The narrators for the audiobook are phenomenal. Just recommended it to somebody at work, and she was so excited to get home to try to finish reading it tonight because she was like 2/3 of the way through. Just written very well. I really enjoyed that one.
All right. So Emily, can you bring us around to some
Let's
happy?
lighten it up.
I read a happy book.
Yay!
I read a sweet book. I read a really lighthearted, nice, fun time, soft read book. It was great. The tagline on it is high fantasy with low stakes, and nothing has been more accurate about a book ever. It was really delightful, honestly. I went in, I didn't really have any expectations beyond Shannon Maguire's blurb on the bottom calling it sweet and beautiful and kind. So from there I was like, this is going to be a good vibe. And my wife bought Chuck Tingle's new Camp Damascus horror novel at the same time. So we were reading this book and Camp Damascus right next to each other for hours. And so I'm sitting here with this happy little grin on my face, like, oh, this is so cute, and making cute little giggle noises or whatever. And every now and again, and then just every few minutes, Taylor's just like, ugh. It's just we're having very different experiences right now. So the plot, the premise behind Legends and Lattes is that an orc named Viv has decided to give up the adventuring life and open a coffee shop in a city where absolutely nobody has ever heard of coffee. So the book opens with her last mission with her squad, basically. And it's very D&D heavy. So if you have any familiarity with D&D, you're going to feel so at home in this book. It's so comfy. It's delightful. Mwah. If you aren't familiar with D&D, it's not hitting you over the head with any terminology for anything. And even the things that are very clearly direct references are slightly renamed. I mean, one, save yourself from Wizards of the Coast, let's be real. But you won't get lost in it, is the point. So anyway, so she gets a rock thing out of the forehead of a monster that she kills that I interpreted as spider-like, but I don't know that it was intended to be a spider. But at any rate, she takes this rock thing out of its forehead after she kills it because it has a little rhyme attached to it. Basically, there's this legend that it gives you good luck, sort of, if you do it right. So she takes this thing and all of the money that she has saved from her adventurings or whatever, and she leaves her adventuring party to go to the city and find a place. And it is, the energy is just, it's light and sparkly through the beginning part of it because she is in a new place. And like, especially if you've ever moved to a new place without like having anything set up when you get there, there's something really like, I mean, if you can like separate yourself from the stress monster of not having anything in your life prepared for you while you're in this brand new place. I moved to Boston without any plan. So by the way, like I had nowhere to live. I had no job. I had like grad school planned in 3 months from now. That was my plan. So this felt really familiar to me in the opening parts of this. But anyway, so Viv is going through this town and she's got the equivalent of a dowsing rod to find her ley line in this city. And she finds the place where she wants to open this coffee shop and she buys the building. And then she goes and finds herself a worker to help build this whole thing up into, because it was a livery and now it needs to not be. So she goes and finds herself a worker and she's doing this and that and whatever. And they get this cafe set up and she's pretty confident about it right up until they're like gonna open essentially. Yeah. And then she's like, what if nobody comes? What if nobody likes it? What if this doesn't work? And the people that she has hired are like, you can't quit now. Like you haven't, you're at the starting line, homegirl. You have to keep going. Like now's not when.
Yeah.
So they open this coffee shop, and it's very slow going. But the person that she hires to work in her little cafe turns out to be a succubus, which is not, it doesn't go where like initially you'd think it would go when someone introduces succubus on the page. You're like, oh, it doesn't go there. Oh. At any point it doesn't go there actually, and it is considered extremely rude every single time to call out the fact that she is a succubus in polite conversation. Like it is not considered polite to be like, oh hey, I know what you are. I mean, go figure, that's not really polite for anybody anywhere. But
where are you really
kink
from?
shame people.
Yeah.
In public.
Right. So there are basically two main tensions in this book. The first of them is that Viv did not explain to her adventuring group what she was doing when she left. Like she didn't say, hey, I'm done, I'm gonna go do a thing. Like she just left because she was afraid that if she had to explain herself, she would talk herself out of it. Okay, so she just left. She just left. So the tension is that one of the people in her group is a piece of shit, who is also jealous and arrogant and decides that she is trying to stiff them because she didn't want the rest of the treasure that was in this cave where they killed the monster. She just wanted this rock. So clearly she's cutting them out of some big thing, right? Like I think, and anyone who's played D&D in multiple groups has had a player like that, has had a player they've had to deal with, like Fennis. Fennis is a piece of shit and I hate him. Anyway, standing down. It's okay. I may have had a Fennis recently. It's fine. Anyway, so the second tension is sort of a little bit of a mafia-like situation on first appearances. I'm not going to like spoil the fun parts of this book because I genuinely think that like anyone who needs about 5 hours of a soft, fun, sweet read should pick this one up. It's so wonderful. It's so worth it. I enjoyed literally every minute of it. My favorite character is the baker that they hire, because he's a ratkin and his name is Thimble and he is so sweet and he doesn't talk much. He mostly, and like in a whisper and like in as few words as possible. His longest sentence is like after he's known them for at least a couple of weeks, and it's 5 words. Like it's 4.5 words, let's be real, because one of them is like a T apostrophe, like short. It's not even a whole word. It's 4.5 words. He's so small, and he's so cute, and he's an absolute genius. And like, there is a point in the book where things very much go wrong for Viv and the cafe. And it's the kind of where things go wrong that like can be a make or break point. It, there is equal chance of like, you can come back from this. Like, if you can get your community to rally around you and help you with this, like, you can come back from this and be fine, or you can give up, and that's your call right now. Like, this is the crossroads that you have. It is find a community to help you rebuild or move on. And Viv's community pushes her. They start but like push her into following to keep up with it, because she kind of, there's a little bit of an element of shock and like the petulance, like, fine, why should I bother trying to redo this? Like, I already lost everything. I can't afford to do this again. I have no money, you know? And they get it rebuilt better than before. And all I will say is that Fennis gets his comeuppance.
Good.
And it's so worth it. It's so satisfying. Oh, it's so satisfying. There's also a dire cat, which is also, I think, an important element of this book. There is a dire cat. It is a big kitty, and she just comes around and will hang out in the cafe sometimes.
And is a cat.
Yeah, she comes and she goes on her own terms. Thank you very much. And she's great. I love her too.
All I've heard of this book, I have a copy because somebody recommended it to me, because they were like, if you like D&D, you'll like this, which I think you also said there. But like, all I've heard of this book really is that people are like, this is the poster child for this new subgenre of fantasy called cozy fantasy. And I'm like, okay, I'm into it. Sure, why not?
And Travis Baldry is working on a sequel, because there's a preview for the follow-up in the end of this
Bone
book.
Dust, which I think is out in November, because I've had somebody ask to pre-order it at my bookstore.
Yeah, the preview thing in the back is just called Pages to Fill. So yeah, Pages to Fill, Legends of Mate story. But anyway, yeah, I look forward to reading more of them. I think Travis should absolutely keep doing this all day, every day. Like, I think this should just be his thing. Like, these are so sweet. I want to see all kinds of characters and people doing this. I don't even care if the next one follows the same group of people. I would in fact love it if they don't. I just want more sweet little stories in little fantasy settings like this, where the stakes are low and everyone is nice to each other, and even the mean people are not that mean.
It was reminding me of this. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was talking to some coworkers today because I was trying to figure out, what everyone was reading recently for like social media posts and stuff. And a couple of them had mentioned Legends and Lattes. And they both kind of mentioned it in the realm of, oh, it was not what I was hoping for, or something like that. And it was just kind of like, it's just there to make you feel good. Like, how do you, like, because like one of them was just like, oh, I read it after all of the great reviews and all of this, and it was just like kind of disappointing because there wasn't really much of a romance plot in it, and there wasn't like, and it was just all about coffee, and it was just like, yeah, and
like, this is a book for people who like food. Okay, that's the reality of this. There is a little bit of a romance in the pages. It's very sweet. It's cute. I like it a lot. There are a lot of really, really wonderful, sweet friendship moments throughout. One of the guy that she, the carpenter handyman person that she hires to help do all of this stuff, is named Calamity, and he goes by Cal. And before they actually name choose the name for the cafe, he's asking her what they're going to do with it, and they're talking about it, and she kind of jokes and she goes, well, maybe I'll call it Calamity Coffee. That's got a nice ring to it. I think it could have been Calamity Coffee. I think that would have been great. Completely different mood, but I think it would have been great.
And like my husband read it too, and I was saying to the people I was talking to today, I was just like, my husband was saying that it was just nice to have just a break where, like you said, the stakes are low, and you're not worried about some end of the world thing. You're not worried about huge interpersonal conflict. It's just kind of nice and sweet, and like, let's just take a moment to appreciate the good things in life, or in fantasy life.
Yeah, so much of the stuff that I read is like extremely preoccupied with digging into the human experience, and often through like non-human characters as well. A lot of what I read is looking at the way that humans interact with ourselves and each other, and there's a lot to dig into that. I love literature that really dives into what does it mean to be a person, particularly a person in the society that we are forced to live within, that doesn't want us, for one thing. I mean, as like an overtly queer person who is also like neurodivergent in however many different ways that I am, like the United States just does not really want me to exist. It doesn't want me here. And so like, and I am existing in a place of significantly more privilege than a number of people that I know have, and it is hard to have to accept that I don't have a choice on the society that I live in. I don't have a choice on what parts of this I can actually affect. And ultimately the like moral problem and quandary is that you can't change it individually, and so the books that are really digging into what that means and how to reconcile yourself all together into your own person as a pillar. Like I think all of that is really interesting, and it's it is nice to have a break every now and again. Like there are conflicts, there are stakes in this. They're just not world-ending stakes. And I think it's important sometimes for us to take a breath and remind ourselves that not every conflict has to be on world-ending stakes.
Or you read a book about a female oceanographer.
Oh,
I was also
speaking of, sorry, one really fast. There is a webcomic called Tiger Tiger that you might actually really like, because it is about a noblewoman basically who is super, super interested in sponges, and I imagine it is very heavily influenced by this story. And she trades places with her twin brother to go out to basically steal his ship and go out to sea to go and study her sea sponges herself.
Move on, scientists.
There's a whole it's a whole thing. It's a great time. But also like there's the first mate of the ship is like supposed to be her fiance, and so like there's a whole big thing where he finds out that it's her, but he's not supposed to know that it's her. And so then it's this whole big interaction with her finding her brother's journals and realizing that her brother is absolutely gay, and that's not supposed to be common knowledge. It's cute, it's sweet, and there's also sea monsters that are top notch. This particular comic artist Taylor introduced me to ages ago, and I can never remember what the name of that first comic was, which is so unfortunate. She abandoned it. It was amazing. But Tiger Tiger is really good. And if you liked the oceanographer story, you should check it out.
Before we move on to letting Michaela talk about fan fiction, trying to be aware of time as well, I just want to say that people who recommended Legends and Lattes to me also recommended the Mead Mishap series by Kimberly Lemming. The first book of that is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. And the second, there's some short stories as well, but the 2 full books is that one, and then the second one that's out right now is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that is a couple of books that maybe also, because anything that's willing to use yeet in the title,
Yeah, I'm
is
in.
going to be a feeling. So anyway, I'm sorry, Michaela, please take us away with some Stranger Things fan fiction.
Sure, yeah. That's what I'm here for. So, again, if you haven't watched these before, my brain has just been very much stuck on Steve Harrington and Eddie Munson Steddie as a couple, and I have been just reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fan fictions about those two boys. Stranger Things. So, yeah, that's the context you get. If you if you need to know about Stranger Things, I'll talk a little bit about some of the
We've
things.
been asking Michaela to make her own individual video on this for the 3rd reading roundtable in a row. We will suggest Michaela share her ace knowledge of this, like, #1 reader of this.
I'm definitely not the
fanfiction.
I read a lot. Unimportant. My last 2 recommendations were like really long form chaptered fics that are like very in depth. Today I'm going to talk about a one shot that's 3,600 words. So it's like a little itty bitty little nibble. I recently was recommended a AO3 author called Ghost to the Party, and I read like every single fic that they wrote. Today I want to talk about the fic called Let Me See You. The premise of this fic is, if you're a fan of Stranger Things, then you are probably a fan of a character called Murray Bowman, who is a comic relief sort of character, and every season, with maybe the exception of season 4, he like gets a couple together by being like very blunt and reading them. So in season 2, it's Nancy and Jonathan. In season 3, it's Hopper and Joyce. I don't think he's in season 4, but I don't think he gets a couple together in season 4, at least not that I am remembering at this point. But he essentially just like tells them all of their trauma, and at the end of it, the couple gets together. So
Yes.
yeah, basically, the premise of this fic is like Murray just did that to Steve and Eddie. You don't get to see what he says about them. You sort of get the concept from the conversation that Steve and Eddie have after that confrontation happens. And Murray chooses to do this at what I'm assuming is a family dinner where all of the older teens are there, and Hopper and Joyce are there. And he lets Steve become aware of the fact that before his relationship with Nancy like officially ended, Nancy and Jonathan had sex. So Steve's being told, your ex-girlfriend cheated on you, which he kind of had a feeling of, but didn't really know hard facts. And their relationship at that point was like kind of over. So like this is like kind of like a wishy-washy. They hadn't officially broken up, but they had a fight and it was probably broken up. And also because of the nature of this conversation, he's outing Eddie to everybody as gay. And it's the 80s, so that's not super cool to do in front of like the chief of police, all of your closest friends who don't necessarily, you don't know whether they're cool with that or not. So like that conversation happens. Steve is pissed off. Joyce yells at Jonathan and Nancy. Eddie gets up and runs away because he was in shock, and he runs away. And then Steve follows him, and you get this conversation between Steve and Eddie where like essentially Eddie like complains. He's like, everybody keeps taking this away from me because I was the queer satanic cult leader. Like everybody knew I was gay. I never got to come out, and he just took it away from me again. Like I didn't get to come out like this. Like he's pissed about it. And Steve goes, I want to hear it from you. Like, is this true? Like, is what he said true? Because what he said about me was true. And like he like gives this like I am bi, I'm like into you. And you have their coming together moment, and then them leaving without talking to anybody else. And it's just 3,000 words of this one little like reaction to this thing, which was really beautiful. You get this really beautiful like monologue from Eddie about what it's like to be visibly queer, even when you don't like he uses it as armor. Eddie's character is very flamboyant in a lot of ways, he's flagging in the middle of Indiana. Like he's definitely not hiding the fact that he's queer, but it is still taking his power away of being able to like say to his crush that like, I'm queer and I'm into you. And also like just that's not, you don't do that. Especially not in the 1980s, but it was really powerful. It was really powerful fic, and for something so bite-sized and short, and T-rated, like there's no sex scenes. I think they might kiss, but I don't think that there's anything else out of that scene. It was just a really good scene, and people don't use Murray very often in these fics. I liked when they do, it's usually in a comedic way. I liked that this was used in a critical way, because the way that Murray like calls people out, especially publicly like that, would be aggressive. Like it's not cool. Like it's not a good way to talk to people. And it's funny as like an outsider, but like in the moment, it's not a good way to do things. But I just really loved that conversation, because I don't think it's had enough of like, people keep taking my power away from me and like and assuming my identity and telling other people, and I like, when do I get my moment to be like, this is me? It was cool. It was a good fic. So I'm gonna recommend it. It's tiny, and if you have any interest in any of that, highly recommend that as just something to read. Yeah. That's all I got. It's my fic today. No commentary. Nobody has questions.
I don't think I even finished watching the first season of Stranger Things, to be honest with you. I recall maybe 4 episodes.
You're good. Don't
Of
worry.
it. So I literally, as you were talking, I had to look up who Eddie was, because I know who Steve is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. I love people. Isaac, my partner, has asked me like why I got so fixated on this, and I could not tell you why specifically these 2 characters, but I do really like Steve and Eddie as foils. I think Eddie narratively was designed to be sort of a Steve stand-in in Dustin's life, because they don't want to kill off Steve because he's like one of the most popular characters on the show, but they wanted to give Dustin the trauma of like this like older brother father figure dying. And it
Spoiler alert.
Sorry, spoilers for people.
It's fine. I wasn't likely to watch it anyway.
Dies, if you didn't know. That's the other thing that people
I could have put 2 and 2 together.
Yes.
He was an openly queer character in an 80s.
Yes, yeah.
Of course he was gonna die.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, there's actually not that much like actual death in Stranger Things.
There's one major character death like every single season, and that's about it.
Or like perceived death, or like honestly, I feel like doing that with season 4.
Season 3 has a lot of death.
An aberration.
So my experience with Stranger Things, I sat down to watch it, and Barb hit the screen with her fucking amazing glasses, just absolutely outstanding, amazing 80s glasses with like the low handle, the low bar that comes up or over, and they're humongous. And I looked at these things, I was like, first of all, I fucking need these glasses. I'm so excited to have amazing glasses representation in my life, and she's dead.
Yeah.
That was my experience with Stranger Things.
Taylor and I watched Stranger Things season 1 together, virtually. First episode, we were both like, favorite character, Barb, favorite character. Season 2 at the end, Barb gets dragged into another dimension. We're like, Will was fine, she'll be fine. Beginning of season 3, nope, dead. Nope. Yep, dead. And then we were both like,
here's the thing that we've discovered about Michaela over the years, which is that if Michaela names a side character as her favorite character, because that's often Michaela's thing, she names a side character her favorite character. That character is very dead.
Oh yeah,
every time.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like they could have like 2 lines of dialogue, and I'm like, that guy was funny, dead.
That guy in the red shirt over there, really funny.
Like, I'm like, Brooklyn, so my favorite. Hammer on you. Just like but yes, Steve being obviously you have this like opposites attract thing of like preppy jock boy and the like satanic gay cult leader. Like these things are fun. There's the interesting dynamic of Steve's character arc being in season 1, he's like actively homophobic. In season 2, he's learning to become better for the like nerdy thing. So he's like rejecting a little bit of his like ingrained popularity culture stuff. In season 3, he becomes best friends with an openly lesbian character, and he learns about her and like decides, actually, you know what? No, that's wrong. And I'm going to change the way that I'm thinking. So then this idea of like, okay, maybe now he's going to look at his own identity and go, wait, maybe I'm bisexual is also super interesting. And again, Eddie is openly queer coded. It's not confirmed canon in the show, but like, again, pretty sure he's flagging. He flirts actively with Steve on screen, which is all ad-libbed by his actor, but still they put it in the show, so that's canon. And just like, he's a metalhead, like being any sort of subculture, usually it's very queer coded. He's flamboyant, you know, we get Eddie. So like there's that aspect to it. And again, this like foil of like they're opposites, but they're also the same, they serve the same purpose. They are very like, this is my group and I will protect them with my life, literally. Yeah, they're just interesting characters. And obviously we love Stevie. Stevie can hold so much trauma. That boy can fit so much trauma inside of him. It's good. It's a good time.
Aren't we a happy bunch?
I
feel like we tried.
Yeah, no, I picked a mildly angsty fic, but like there's a lot of fluffy fics out there too. I've read every single soulmate fic that I could find. And you read a good one. That one was nice.
I've read a couple of nicer things since Lovecraft, but since I spent the last few months on that, I figured that it would probably be best to actually discuss that. But the follow-up, the one that I had right after I finished Lovecraft, was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Not exactly an upper,
sad,
incredibly powerful, incredibly well written. Not an upper.
No.
But then I listened to A Wrinkle in Time, so, you know, cute.
Yeah.
And now I'm reading the Odyssey, so, you know, I don't do things by halves.
I actually accomplished listening to a whole audiobook all by myself, which is maybe the first time that's ever actually happened. I started listening to The Night Circus like 3 years ago, or longer, maybe even, on my iPhone, and I have since changed phones and no longer have access to the ebook, so I have never finished it. I literally own a physical copy. It is on a shelf in my living room. Have not finished it. But I did just listen to the entirety of Daisy Jones and the Six, which was fantastic.
I feel like that would be a good audiobook. Did they put music in?
No, there's no music, but it is like a full cast. So
Okay,
every single actor or like person that speaks in the book has their own voice actor, and it's spliced together beautifully. It was really fun to listen to, actually. I was really impressed with how it went.
That's actually why on our like buddy challenge for Betwixt the Books, one thing that Michaela and I actually listed as a thing was a full cast audio, because they are rather rare. First of all, you need a specific book to make that work, and also secondly, and this I'm sure is not surprising, they're extremely more expensive to produce.
Yeah.
So when full cast audios are produced, they tend to be for very specific books, and they're just, you know, they have that extra production, like radio play quality to them. So maybe someday this year, Michaela and I will get around to that.
It's worth doing. Are you muted?
Erica, you're muted.
You're muted.
Oops. I coughed and I didn't unmute. Good Omens has one now. Redwall has one. I grew up listening to that one, spliced together very poorly. The audio levels are so different. It's so funny. But I think my sister's listening to the Good Omens ones, because she is a huge Ineffable Husbands fan. So that one, and that was up for an Audie this year as well. And it's read in part by Michael Sheen and Dave Tennant. So if you wanted one to start with, that's there. So my mom's starting to listen to it, and she's not like a fantasy reader, but she's probably listening to it because, you know, my sister's been freaking out about it for like 3 or 4 years now. And whenever season 1 came out, and she's just like, I mean, it's like, I don't know, I don't really know if I get it. There's like parts where it's funny, but other times I'm not really sure. I'm just like, oh, okay, you like the Terry Pratchett parts, but not so much the Neil Gaiman parts. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
I think we
that's
have a
at
review
least a
up
couple
Good
of full
Omens.
casts that I
Is that
know
right?
of.
Yeah.
So.
If you want to see some really baby-faced Michaela, Gretchen, Taylor, and our friend, I think that was still a season, because that was Rachel's pick.
Yeah.
So at the time when there was 4 of us doing Bibliomancy for Beginners, I think that was our first or second season?
I think it was the second season.
Second season?
I think
Yeah,
it
we
was.
could do a whole mindful of time. I think I'm going to close us out here because this is a perfect segue into full cast audio is one of the bits of our reading challenge that we still have to hit. We have not picked a book for that. We did decide to read the entire Percy Jackson series. I have finished it. Michaela is in the process.
I started the first one this week, so I have at least started.
Yeah, we started the process because we're dumb and we picked a quintet. But coming up in the month of August, this is serving as our like second video kind of from July that got pushed a little bit due to scheduling conflicts. So August is actually a two review book month for us. If we can make this happen, we are because we are a Katie Roberts Stan channel now, we will be doing reviews of the latest Dark Olympus book, Cruel Seduction. That is coming up first, and then if we are also able to get to it, we will be doing Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. And if you know anything, this is the person who wrote like for horror novella that I actually enjoyed, and those are 2 words that never go under my enjoy column, which is why we decided to also read this one as well. So that is our plan. Will we stick to the plan? Consistency is not the watchword here at Good Hooks the Books. So we'll see what happens, but we will definitely be doing Cruel Seduction because if you're not familiar, I had like an actual breakdown when we filmed our last video talking about how I could not believe that they were making a villain from the last book a love interest in this book. And I was like, bleh. So we have to read this because I have got to understand how they are going to make this work, because I'm not sure that it will. I have complete faith in Katie Roberts, but I'm a little bit afraid. So you can look forward to that. Once again, we would like to thank Erica and Emily for joining us. And, you know, we started doing this because we love talking about books, and it's just so much more fun rather than, you know, Michaela and I on our individual cameras going back and forth, having real conversations with people that we love and enjoy speaking with and getting new book recommendations. So we hope that you enjoy this. We certainly are, and that you'll join us for our next one. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good night. Bye.